Well, it's finally here. After delay, after delay, after delay, A Quiet Place Part 2, the sequel to, honestly, one of my favorite films of all time, A Quiet Place, is finally here. And if you guys saw my most anticipated films of 2021 video, you know this film was extremely high. So, what did I think about it? Well, let's talk about it. So if you saw the title of this video or saw the thumbnail, you probably know how I felt about A Quiet Place Part 2. I low-key kind of loved it. In fact, I would darn to say that I think I liked it a bit more than the first film, which means this is one of my favorite films of all time. And yes, I could be just over hyping it because I just walked out of watching the film. But this film does everything that the first one did and expands on it. The family dynamic is still there, the intensity, chills, and scares are still there, but this film just feels like a different movie in pretty much all the best ways. Sometimes you watch a sequel and you're like, this feels totally inconsistent from that first film. I just don't like it. This film is a great continuation, literally, of that first film. But yet again, it also is its own film, but hear me out. It feels different than that first film, but you can't just walk into this film without seeing that first film. That first film matters. This film does not recap that whole first film for people that haven't seen that first film. They do mention some things that happened in that first film, but for the most part, this is its own continuation of that first film. It's not a standalone film where you can just watch it without seeing that first film. Okay. But again, this is the way this film feels. It feels more epic in scale, which the trailers definitely did show. The trailers definitely did show that this was going to be a much more bigger budget than that first film, which you can definitely tell that this film had a much higher budget than that first film. Not like exceedingly high, but a bigger budget. And you could tell, and I thought that would be a hindrance, but it doesn't. It adds to the sequences. This film can have much more bigger set pieces, and bigger does not always mean better, but in this case, it does. Okay, let's talk very specifics because I sound like I'm going all over the place. Alright, the performances in this film are great. Emily Blunt is great. John Krasinski, the little bit that he is in this film, is also great, and this has really great child acting like in the first film. And the new cast that's here is also really stellar. And also something that caught my eye, like the first film, this film is masterfully directed. Once again, John Krasinski shows that he is a master behind the camera. And I think this film is probably better shot than that first film. The first film had some stunning sequences in terms of cinematography, but this film just looks gorgeous. The lighting, the color grade, and the way the camera moves. This is really weird to talk about because normally I don't talk about this stuff, but I noticed it. And also something I also noticed is the sound design. A sound design in a film is exceedingly important, but it's also even more important to a film like this. The way this film uses sound, or the lack of sound, or no sound. At first, it sounds like a gimmick, or you like, oh, this is just really stupid, but it adds so much to the film. It adds more dramatic effect, but also makes the intense sequences more intense, if that makes sense. This film's sound design is one of the best sound designs ever. This film sounds incredible. This is an incredibly sounding film. Also, the pacing of this film, just like the first film, is beautiful. It's not too long, but it's not too short. It's just a perfectly paced movie. And yes, the film does end like it's gonna set up a third film. But like A Quiet Place Part 1 and like A Quiet Place Part 2, you can watch these films together as just a great 3.5 hour marathon. And to be honest, this is the go-to marathon movie. This is the go-to marathon movie. There's quite a bit of movies like maybe Lord of the Rings or maybe the Hobbit trilogy that you can marathon. But these two films, and probably the third one when it comes out in a couple years, will be the go-to movie trilogy. Also, what I liked about this film is it expanded the world in a very convincing way. With that first film, we were basically just confined to the house. We went to some different locations, but for the most part, we were confined in that claustrophobic home. And for that first film, it worked. John Krasinski was able to build scares and tension in that small location. But it's really simple to find cool ways to add suspense in a house. I'm not saying it's easy to execute, but it's easy to make good, but it's not easy. What I'm trying to say is a lot of films do that. This film is in a lot of open fields. There's some houses, there's some buildings, but for the most part, you have to make these creatures seem scary in an open area, and they do. There is more of the creatures in this film than there was in the first film, and more does not always mean better, but again, it worked for me. I didn't feel like the creatures were overused. They're definitely in the film a lot more, and there's more of them, but they're still really well used, and the visual effects on them are great. There is one or two times where the visuals are a bit shoddy, but for the most part, the visuals are great. And for me, if you haven't seen the first film, the way they find a weakness, I thought would be a hindrance on making these creatures feel scary and is scary, but they don't. They're still really intense, really scary, and really well done. This is just such a really well made film, and I also love that we got to meet more people and cultures, because again, that first film was just that family and that family dynamic. This film kind of shies away from that family dynamic a little bit, but still keeps it. The family dynamic is still present in this film, but I love that we got to meet more cultures, good and bad, in this film, which I really loved. This film is also extremely brutal, definitely more so than the first film. It's nothing like insane or anything, but there were some pretty brutal moments where it's like, all right, that's really well executed. Also, this film might be more suspenseful than the first film, and that film had some intense suspenseful moments, especially that giving birth scene. That's really great, and I don't think anything in this film truly tops that, but it comes extremely close. This film builds tension great. The music is also great, and if I had to pick some flaws, some of the CGI on the creatures doesn't look great, and the ending doesn't leave as much of a impact as that first film, but that's literally just me nitpicking it. I think this might be a bit better than the first film. I don't know. I love them both so equally, but the characterization, the world building, the suspense, the way this film is executed makes me truly love this film. And I'm going to give A Quiet Place Part 2 an A. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. What do you guys think of A Quiet Place Part 2? Let us know all your thoughts down in the comment section below. And as always, guys, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. General out.